Renaissance, Reformation, and Exploration by Italy Flowers. The Renaissance. It was a time period between the 1300s and the 1600s. It was a time of rebirth in art and learning. It began in Italy, and it was reminders of ancient Rome. Wealthy merchants ruled the city and became patrons. Trade was very high at the time, and they had a secular view on things due to the church. Arts. They had new ways of artistic ways, such as shading, which made things look round and real, perspective, which made things 3D, and they used the human anatomy as a live example when they made paintings and sculptures. Some of the famous artists would be Leonardo da Vinci. He made the Mona Lisa, the Last Supper, and the Vitruvian Man. There was Michelangelo. He did the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and David. And then there was Raphael. He did the School of Athens, Sistine Madonna, and those were only a few of what these men did. Renaissance people. An ideal Renaissance woman would be beautiful, spunky, yet reserved, graceful, charming, and just a polite woman. And she must have known all the classics. And they can inspire art, but never create it. Renaissance man, he would be a skilled man with multiple talents, and he would be skilled in multiple different areas. Printing. Chinese papermaking came into Europe in the 1300s. In the 1400s, Germans made movable type, and in 1456, a man named Johann Gutenberg, a failed businessman, invented the first printing press, where he later began to print Bibles. The books became cheaper, which meant there were more of them made, which meant that more people wanted them, which meant that they started to learn how to read and write. The printing revolution later caused a religious change in the 1500s. Renaissance facts. More Greek and Roman architecture was used, and some of the examples would be columns, domes, and arches. They wrote in a vernacular way, vernacular meaning the language or dialect spoken by ordinary people in a particular place. They expressed themselves through their writing. Exploration. The need for Asian spices and goods increased in Europe in the 1400s. The goal of the Europeans was to find a direct route to Asia for religious purposes, and out of curiosity. The need for exploration caused new technology to arise, such as the magnetic compass, new maps, and shipbuilding. Encounters. Columbus sailed to the West Indies in 1492. The Spanish conquistadors followed suit. They settled on the islands of Hispaniola, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. The Taino Indians were very kind to them, but apparently they weren't nice enough, because the Indians and gold were brought back to Europe. 90% of the Native Americans were wiped out by the diseases brought by the Spanish, such as smallpox, measles, and influenza. Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange was a global exchange between Europe and the New World, trading food, animals, and plants. New World trading goods were tobacco, pineapple, cacao beans, and squash. And European trades were livestock, sugarcane, and bananas. There were also diseases. Mercantilism. This is a nation's power based on their wealth, meaning you need to deport more than you import to get the money. You need transportation to transport the goods back and forth from one place to the other. You had to have access to the source, then the industries needed to produce the product. Which is another reason that they went to the New World, was to find different products. It was controlled by the mother country, and it was used as like a trading place or post. Triangular trade was where slavery was developed when they needed the workers on the sugar plantations. Africa was the middle passage where the slaves were actually chosen. The New World was where sugar, tobacco, molasses, and rum were traded, and Europe, their trades were beads, cloth, hardware, salt, and weapons. Reformation geography. About 300,000 years ago, during the Paleolithic time, hunters came into the North America from Asia across the Bering Strait. global warming melted the bridge, so the hunters weren't able to get back from where they came from. So they spread around the Americas. America was split into two parts. North America, where the Rocky Mountains, Sierra Madre, and the Mississippi River were, and then there was South America, where the Andes Mountains and the Amazon River were. North America. The Northwest had Eskimos who used totem poles to mark specific events. The eastern woodlands were long-housed farming villages where there were mound builders. They lived there along the Mississippi River Valley, and it was also home to the Cahokia, which was the largest settlement. The Great Plains is where the buffalo hunters lived, and the Southwest is where irrigation techniques were used. Agriculture. This is where they began to farm. This may have been what killed off large mammals, such as the saber-tooth tiger and the mammoth, which, as you can see, I have a picture of a mammoth up in the corner. Animals such as the llama began to be domesticated. Crops were grown, such as squash, potato, and corn, etc. They developed slower than the world because they didn't have all the resources that most did, such as horses and tools. Chinambas were fake islands made from earth piled on mats that were anchored to the lake bed. They mostly used these because farming was a high demand and they ran out of space, so they did this. Olmecs. The Olmecs was the earliest American civilization, and they were in 1500 BC to 500 BC. They were along the Gulf Coast of Mexico, and religion was life to the Olmecs. They had ceremonial centers, and their achievements were writing and a calendar. Mayans. The Mayans were from 300 AD to 900 AD, and they had a city-state in the Yucatan. They were influenced by the Olmecs, and they built new ways of farming to survive in the rainforest. Sacrifices were performed at temples by the priests. Some temples were used as burial places for some priests and nobles, and the Tikal was the largest temples and palaces. Their ruling chiefs were mostly males, and there were nobles, which were military leaders and officials. There were priests who held the ceremonies, and then there were general population, which were farmers who paid taxes and built temples. Some of their achievements were hieroglyphic writing systems. Priests became mathematicians and astronomers. They created a 365-day calendar, and nobody knows how the Mayans went down. There are only abandoned cities left of them. The Aztecs, which were in 1200 AD. They were nomadic hunters from the north that migrated down. They expanded through their conquers and alliances, and they ruled almost all of Mexico. At a point, there were 30 million of them. The conquered were forced to pay tribute to the Aztecs, and they were very well off money-wise. They had a great military, and they built the Tenochtitlan, which was now known as Mexico City. And Teotihuacan, which was in the 100 AD through 750 AD, they influenced the Aztecs. That's why I have them on the same page. Before they were taken over by invaders, they worshipped the gods and goddesses of nature, and the city had wide roads, big apartment buildings, and large temples. The religions of the Aztecs were very high. There was the chief god, which were Huitzilopochtli. Priests had their own class, actually. Human sacrifices were done, and they sacrificed prisoners or members of the noble family. And they believed that rituals stopped disasters, which means that there were quite a few rituals done. There was only one ruler who was chosen by a council of priests and nobles. Their social order was ruler, noble, warrior, commoners, and then slaves. And some of their achievements were they set bones and handled cavities in your mouth, and they had an accurate calendar. They used herbs to treat wounds and fevers, and they recorded historical events and laws. The Incan Empire. They were found along the Pacific coast, and they emerged from the Andes Mountains. Pachacuti made himself emperor in 1438 and set out to conquer all of South America. Cusco was the city capital. It was made up of representatives from defeated people. The Incas adopted from groups called the Chivan. They adopted temple complexes. The Mochiquica, which were farmers, and they adopted roads, and the Nazcas, who had mathematics skills. An achievement that they had was they expanded step terraces of the older people before them. They had 12,000 miles of road, which was used by the military in use of battles and messengers who were passing messages. They performed surgery on a human skull, and their religion was polytheistic with powerful priests to serve the gods. Their government was totalitarianism, which meant that Sapa Inca had absolute power. Local chieftains and nobles ruled the provinces, and officials collected taxes and enforced the laws. And the queen, she could rule in absence of the king, and their language was the Quechua. And that's all on my PowerPoint. Thanks for listening.